Andrew, I think you and I are the last ones, so we better be entertaining.
Counting on you for that.
All right, we'll start with heavy-hitting questions. You said in February that AGI is about 50 years away.
Oh, I see.
Still believe that, given how fast things are moving?
I think depending on how you define AGI, we might have gotten to AGI either 30 years ago, or I think quite possibly not yet for many decades. The definition I know is AI that could do any intellectual task a human can, and that means AI that could take 5 years and write a novel PhD thesis, or maybe faster, or AI that any of us with a few hours of practice could learn to drive a truck through a forest, so AGI seems to me like it would have to do that too. But because of incentives between a Microsoft and a OpenAI contract, which has changed, so that's just gone away, there was a specific financial incentive to lower the bar for AGI to make it easier to get there. And there was this definition of AI that could do 50% of all economically useful work. But if only we had put in place that definition 100 years ago, then as most of the work transitioned from agriculture to non-agricultural work, then I would declare we got to AGI like 30 years ago or 50 years ago or something. So depending on how you define it, I think the original definition is still many decades away, but I think because the agreement between Microsoft and OpenAI, I think that there's now less hype about AGI, which I think is a good thing.
All right, another hard-hitting question. A lot of controversy about open models. A lot of talk in Silicon Valley, a lot of talk in Washington, a lot of people posting about open models. In fact, Jensen's first tweet, he's never sent out an X post ever before. His first X post was about open models and defending it. What do you think of open models? Why do you think we need it? What's the concerns around security? Are those things valid?
Over the last 3 years, 2, 3 years ago, I was surprised at the intensity of the attack on open weight models. I think many of you have already seen, right? If someone spent billions of dollars training a model, it's kind of inconvenient if someone else releases an open weight version that degrades the value of that investment. So kind of 2, 3 years ago, I was in the room when a number of executives from a number of companies, kind of the obvious ones, were saying to government regulators, frankly, misleading, hyperbolic things about AI safety in order to try to drive regulatory capture. I think I'm actually very glad that a little bit later, because of the work that a lot of the open source community did, flying to DC, speaking with Congress, speaking with the White House, that at this moment in time, there is broad awareness in Washington, DC about the regulatory capture moves. And I think, but at the same time, I was actually really happy that Jensen put out that statement. Really well written, worth reading if you've not yet read his statement on why open weight models are an important thing. And right now, my read is the battle for the sentiment of open weight models is won on social media, but it is not yet won in Washington, DC, and in our state houses, so we cannot yet relent on our defense on open weight models. From what I'm seeing, I think open weight models seem safer to me than closed weight models. In fact, just last week, I had my own example of the OpenAI hacking Hugging Face and Hugging Face needing an open weight model to defend Hugging Face. So my team was doing security review of an open source agent harness that my friend Rohit Prasad and I have released called Open Worker. And both Fable 5 and 5.6 Soul refuse beyond a certain point. And we actually used GM 5.2 and Kimi K3 in order to complete our own security review. To be clear, I hope Anthropic and OpenAI succeed. I like both companies. I might be the only person in the world that both Sam and Dario has worked for. So I really hope these businesses succeed. At the same time, I hope we find a path to all of my friends in these companies doing well and also having a wonderful, fantastic open way, open source ecosystem, because that ensures that there are no, I don't want there to be gatekeepers to AI.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. And also, since everything costs so much, why pay for more to OpenAI and Anthropic if you can actually train something yourself. You're going to do that for certain things because you need the latest intelligence, and you're going to want certain other things to be trained yourself. So.
And I remember, I think Sequoia actually came out in favor of open source, and you're actually ahead of many other VCs. I really respected that.
I think the history of venture capital is to try to find things that are cheaper, and open source is a form. Open source. Let's move all the way back to open source and not open weight, because I think it's clarifying to study business history. A lot of the products that were developed on the internet were built on open source, and if the open source software was not available, a lot of things would cost a lot more and take a lot longer to build. And only certain companies would be able to sort of build that type of infrastructure. Open source is the reason why there's so much diversity of databases, so much diversity of browsers, so many diversity of many, many things that we do. And open source for a startup, for software, was a form of distribution. And it was a cheap way to show how smart you are, how capable you are, how you're able to build something and give it to the world to use, and then let other developers develop with you. It was a form of recruiting. These things were controlled by large companies for a period of time. And so I think open weight models have a place, closed models have a place, open models have a place. And the knock on open has always been it's not as safe. That was true with security for software, open source software as well. Yes, you have to patch those holes if you're going to use them. But it is a very fast way for you to get up and running. Some other sort of hard-hitting questions. You said recently that there's bubble risk in the model layer?
There's what?
Bubble risk
in
the model layer? I'm asking for a friend, in the investment community.
Yeah, sure.
Should we be worried?
Yeah. Now, I think the other side, I don't know, Alfred likes doing this hard-hitting stuff, I don't know why. I think the part of the statement that I was more confident in was demand for inference. I think there's no practical ceiling, and so as much capital is going into building data centers, if we build the data centers, we will use up, I think, all the inference capacity we can build for quite some time. Doesn't mean no one will lose money. Maybe we'll overbuild, but that risk seems lower. And the model layer, has been the kind of intelligence per dollar invested is a tough equation, right? The capital going in is growing, very quickly. The intelligence is maybe also growing very quickly. So where that plays out, I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic there isn't a bubble, but I think I wish I could rule it out. But I'm actually less worried about, I think we clearly need a lot more data center build-outs for inference, because even take AI agentic coding, I think penetration is very low, but all of us that use AI coding agents see so much, speed and efficiency gain. So I'm very confident that AI coding, just as one example, will have vastly greater penetration in the future and drive vastly greater demand for tokens than there is now.
So we're at the Agentic AI Summit. So what kind of agents are you building? Coding agents is like, what's potentially as big as a coding agent in the future?
I don't know. I wish I knew. Yeah, maybe I want to share one perspective. One thing I think a lot about is, so it turns out that where AI is creating value, with the rise of the internet, there was the horizontal information search layer, where Google, maybe Bing won that. And then there are a lot of verticals, right, with the rise of the internet. So kind of Uber and Lyft fought out for ride sharing, Travelocity, Expedia, fought out for travel, there's retail, and so on. I think what's happened is for the horizontal information discovery layer, ChatGPT and Gemini seem to have the leading position, pretty hard to displace. And then for the vertical applications, the bucket that's the single most valuable so far seems to be AI coding, where coding agents have kind of been incredible. I feel like my team uses a lot of coding agents for data science work as well. I spend some time in the financial sector. So we do some work with some large banks. And I find there are a lot of agentic workflows they're useful for financial services as well. But it feels like there are, I don't know, I wish I knew. I know Alfred's actually spent a lot of time thinking about what are the new categories that may emerge, right? Not just what we could do a bit better, but the brand new creations. You'll say that.
Yeah, if I knew, I would start a company. It's maybe the best time ever to start a company. We often talk about at Sequoia that in technology there's accelerating change, and there's two parts to accelerating change that is very difficult. One of which is what we're talking about today, we didn't talk about 3 months ago, which means that in 3 months, whatever we're talking about today, we won't be talking about in the future. And if you're building a company, which is even more important than if you're like me, who's investing in people who are building a company, you really need to be able to build something that lasts over a longer period of time. Today, given the amount of capital that is needed with compute, you're going to be raising a substantial amount of money, and you want it to last for a decade. It's very, very hard to sort of understand what's going to last for a decade. But I can tell you that one of the things that I think people often confuse is the immediate thing that seems obvious. Those things are gonna get done by even some of you in the audience, but it's also going to be done by large companies. And I use the analogy of mobile. Everything that was on the internet made it to mobile. Mobile apps were a little bit complicated, but it wasn't that hard to take the internet and make it mobile web or mobile app. And then I look at this device, what is it different from the last device that you had, which is a laptop? This thing is always on. So for communications, all the apps around communications blew up. Even email blew up or texting blew up, but you have to find something unique and non-obvious. So even though there are lots of messaging services, WhatsApp was different because it was about long-distance SMS, which is solving a cost problem. SMS inside this country, we all pay one data plan. It wasn't that big of a deal. But if you're sending international SMS, that's very, very expensive. So international SMS, WhatsApp solved that, and that became a big company. And this device had two things that your laptop doesn't have, one of which is the camera. So everybody became a photojournalist, so you can invest in that area. And the other thing was GPS. Everybody had GPS on their phone at some point, and that was not true from the previous generation. And so often when I hear about companies that are taking existing context and processes and feeding it into AI, I'm like, that's obviously going to get done. But the sort of what is uniquely going to be made differently in AI, I think we haven't pushed the boundaries of that. And I'm looking for that.
Maybe I'll share one other thing. I think that a lot of people think about what are the new modes in software. I think it's actually a very valid question. And I find that there's a lot of stuff that can be built, and if it's valuable, let's actually build it. But if whatever you build can be replicated by anyone with a coding agent in 3 months, then the traditional way of running SaaS businesses, where you build software and sell similar software for a long time, seems like that might have to change. So I think that the analysis of modes of what are the deep tech things that are genuinely hard to replicate and that are going to be valuable for long term. And also, I'm actually seeing some businesses where, frankly, the frontier labs have done this. You build stuff that goes obsolete in 3 to 6 months, but you keep on having new stuff that keeps on getting obsolete, but you accumulate some assets along the way. So keep on building something that keeps on going obsolete, but everything that quickly goes obsolete helps you accumulate some asset before it goes obsolete. So the asset you end up accumulating over time grows into hopefully a more defensible mode. So I think these new patterns of building businesses, are quite interesting.
We talked about the bubble thing. Jobs, AI jobs. No AI job apocalypse? You've said that a few times.
Yes.
I agree with you. So why do you think that?
Yeah, so this idea that AI will put 50% of people out of a job, they'll be rioting in the streets or whatever. This is false. There will be no AI job apocalypse. Part of the regulatory capture fear narratives of businesses was this, my technology is dangerous. No, mine is even more dangerous. No, regulate me harder. It's just kind of, and I think I feel like Wall Street Journal just reported a few days ago that even some large businesses that thought AI would reduce labor is actually turning around and starting to hire more. And if you look at the job most affected by AI, it is actually software engineering because of coding agents. So much acceleration and automation. The software engineering job market is very healthy, and frankly, we just can't find enough skilled AI engineers. I believe that as AI starts to enter other sectors as well, be it finance, marketing, HR, administrative jobs, and so on, that we'll see a similar pattern of very rarely job collapse, but people actually end up being busier. And what we've seen in software engineering is if you take, say, a back-end developer and they start using a coding agent, then it frees up, I don't know, some of their time, I don't know, 30, 40, 50%, I'm not sure. But that remaining work that they do, which is a complement to the coding, therefore becomes even more valuable. And if we free up some of their time, then say front-end or back-end developers end up rising and taking on a broader scope, which is why these days I don't hire front-end or back-end or whatever developers. Almost all of my engineers are full-stack developers because we can now all do that. I'm seeing early signs of this in other job roles as well, where previously maybe you had a marketing coordinator that did one role, driving the coordination marketing campaigns. But if AI frees up 30, 40% of the time, that marketing coordinator can rise up and become more of a full cycle marketer and run marketing campaigns from start to finish, do the data analysis, drive growth. And so I think this pattern will repeat in other industries, in other job categories as well. And the number of jobs where AI could do 100% of the time, 100% of the tasks, thus causing a collapse of that job category would be very small. What this means is one of the challenges ahead of us is when someone comes and does, one thing, I think all of us use AI agents a lot in this room, maybe. I don't feel any more, I feel like I'm even busier than I ever was, right? And because when AI does some of our job, the complement becomes even more valuable. But the challenge for a lot of job roles will be upskilling, so that if 30% of your job goes away, how do you rise up and do that broader set of tasks and also learn to use AI. And so that's why I think I also still spend a lot of time at Coursera and Udemy and DeepLearning.ai and LearnVector, which we just announced this week, to try to address that training upskilling.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Andrew. And I think the one thing that people misunderstand, we sit in an academic institution here. In academic institution, you solve one problem and it creates, every problem has a solution. That's part of the sort of thesis in academia, and every solution creates more problems. And I don't think we're going to run out of problems. And maybe the exact thing that you're doing today is going to get automated, but if we lived 200 years ago, 80% of us would be working on our farm to make sure that we can feed ourselves. It's kind of good that we can automate a lot of that so that we can do other things. And so I fully agree that maybe a software engineer will not be coding, but as the last panel said, your ability to break down problems, large problems into smaller and smaller problems is still going to be important. Your ability to figure out which problems to solve is still going to be important. And those are not going away.
Yeah, in fact, in terms of what's not going away, I think, sometimes people say, I feel like the jobpocalypse messaging has made a lot of people nervous about jobs unnecessarily. And I feel like it turns out in our surveys of, excuse me, a lot of software professionals, people are actually confused about where to go and what to learn, and worried about learning something that will go obsolete in 3 months. I spent a lot of my time thinking through what exactly are the skills that being skilled at AI engineering or being skilled at these other things what that will require and help people to get there, and that feels important. I know here in Silicon Valley, there's a ton of work on accelerating AI development. Fully support that. Let's keep working on that. I think the complement of that has had insufficient attention, which is why I would like to also spend more time on accelerating not just AI development, but on accelerating human development. So that too seems important to me.
So maybe following up on that, you're a PhD student here 20 years ago. Is that right, approximately?
Boy, was that long? Yeah, something
At all.
Yeah.
That you've had a fabulous career after graduating. You're a researcher, you're an academic, you're a builder, you're a founder, you're an investor. You were at the forefront of AI while you were at Google Brain. What would you advise people in the audience to do in this kind of day and age?
Actually, I think of all my credentials, you left one out that I'm probably most proud of, which is father. That's really precious.
Father is actually pretty fun too, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. This sounds cliche, but this sounds like the best time ever to build. I find that my teams, we see so many opportunities, and yes, we can code faster now because of coding agents, but somehow all of our appetite, our list of ideas seems to grow even faster than we can deploy coding agents to keep up with us. One thing that I found interesting was, for a long time, my team, in addition to hiring people with strong technical skills, strong AI skills, and all that, we tend to look for people with a high degree of agency, meaning people that don't wait to be told what to do, but will look around, see what's going on in your company or in your context or in your academic university or whatever, and have high agency to just decide, I'm going to do this, do it in a safe and responsible way, don't harm others, but really don't ask, if there's some things you don't need permission to do, so long as you don't harm others, just go do it and prove it out. Or go do it, and if it fails in a way that doesn't harm anyone, that's fine too. The thing that I found really interesting was we're actually seeing in more and more job descriptions, companies looking for people with a high sense of agency. Oh, and the weird way of saying this is I see companies looking for people that are highly agentic.
How do you screen for someone who's has high agency or highly agentic?
I think one of the ways to do it is actually behavioral interviewing. We'll ask people what they're doing, and if someone says, well, the last 5 years I did what my boss told me, that's one type of person. But then there are people that say, you know what, in my spare time I did this, on the weekend I did this, and this failed, oh, but that thing worked. And I tried this, it didn't work, but that worked. There are a lot of people that I mean, frankly, I think it's also so much fun. So, I don't know, last night I was running Codex and Cloud Code in parallel with the same prompt to wake up this morning to see which one did better. And then actually in the car ride over here, I started another. Again, it's just, I do this stuff because it's fun, right? And I think sometimes I build something that ends up being useful to other people too, and that's very satisfying. And a lot of time, I build stuff that's totally useless and they will never see the light of day. But that also, the many very inexpensive failures is also a really fun thing to do. So long as you can do it in a responsible way that doesn't risk anyone.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Thank you very much, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Alfred.
Thanks, sir.